Hi, I'm Elon Salum and you're watching A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. The United States and China extend the tariff truce deadline to November. Trump reveals details of the meeting with Putin in Alaska, saying that he will not act as a broker to end the war in Ukraine. And wildfires continue to spread across Europe amid heat wave. Trade tensions between the world's two largest economies have just hit pause again. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order extending the tariff truce with China by another 90 days.
The clock was ticking and the tariff deadline for China was looming, but President Donald Trump extended the US-China tariff truce by another 90 days. It now stretches to the 10th of November. The tax hikes had been due to expire on Tuesday at 12:01 a.m. The steep tariffs were set to climb to 145% on Chinese goods and 125% on US products. But instead, rates remain at 30% for Chinese imports and 10% for American goods for the time being. President Trump made the announcement on his Truth Social platform. During a news conference on Monday, he had said, "We'll see what happens," whilst highlighting that his relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping was good. China said the extension would provide stability to the global economy. But analysts say it's far from smooth sailing. A senior trade official calls it a strategic pause, one that lets retailers stock up without fear of a tariff shock. Market reaction was immediate. Asia's stock markets rallied. The extension has brought breathing room for negotiations around trade imbalances, market access, national security and semiconductors. Trump has suggested that he would meet with Xi before the end of the year if a trade agreement was struck, and he says that he's getting very close.
US President Donald Trump says both Ukraine and Russia may have to give up territory to end the war. He's preparing for high-stakes talks with Vladimir Putin in Alaska later this week, calling it a feel-out session to see if peace is possible.
US President Donald Trump says that both Ukraine and Russia will need to cede territory to end the war. He made the comment ahead of his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Trump says he'll press Putin to end the conflict, but will not act as a broker, describing the talks as an opportunity to hear what Russia wants. Speaking at the White House on Monday, Trump called the summit a feel-out session and said he would know within the first 2 minutes if progress was possible.
There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody, to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad.
European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky plan to speak with Trump beforehand amid concerns Washington could push Kyiv into concessions. Zelensky has warned that concessions would only embolden Russia, accusing Moscow of preparing new offensives rather than peace.
Today there was also a report from the Intelligence and Military Command on what Putin is counting on and what he is actually preparing for, including military preparations. He is definitely not preparing for a ceasefire or an end to the war.
The Alaska summit comes amid a wave of diplomacy on Russia's side. Putin has spoken with leaders from China, India, Brazil, while Zelensky has sought support from India and Saudi Arabia. Germany will host a virtual meeting of European leaders on Wednesday to coordinate pressure on Moscow before their call with Trump.
Preparations have already started for the Alaska meeting, although the exact location hasn't yet been confirmed. With security measures already being put in place, residents have expressed mixed views about the high-profile summit.
Local residents in Anchorage in Alaska have mixed views on the upcoming historic meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday. The exact location has not yet been officially announced, but preparations have already begun. People living in the city say they view the day as both an opportunity and a challenge.
Well, I think it's really a fascinating opportunity for Alaska to shine in what we can do for those kind of venues. I think it's a safe venue for both the leaders to come here. We have a huge Air Force base and Army base next to Anchorage, and so I think that it's going to be a safe location for them. I think it'll also be very exciting for Alaska and for the city of Anchorage to be a part of something like that. I think it's fairly historic.
I think it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate against Trump when he's here. We spend a lot of time far away trying to send messages to our congressmen, senators, saying all of the things that we really find to be reprehensible about this administration. And we'll be here demonstrating when he's here.
The Federal Aviation Administration will close the airspace around Anchorage. Traffic delays are also expected, with details on which roads will be closed to be announced in the coming days. For security reasons, state officials and the local mayor have not yet revealed the venue for the summit, and the White House has declined to comment on the matter. Historically, such high-level meetings have been held at airports or military bases. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson and Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport are considered the most suitable locations.
President Donald Trump announced he's deploying 800 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. and placing the city's police force under federal control, despite 2024's violent crime hitting a 30-year low. He claims the escalating lawlessness justifies expanding executive powers in Democratic-run cities, and he's eyeing Washington. Hundreds of federal agents from the FBI, ICE, DEA, ATF are already on the ground, and Trump hasn't ruled out using the military if needed. Attorney General Pam Bondi will take over managing the city's police department. Critics say he's manufacturing a crisis to centralize power. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the killing of 6 Palestinian journalists in an Israeli airstrike on Sunday in Gaza City. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said this shows how dangerous it's for journalists. He asked for a fair investigation. Since the war started, at least 242 journalists have died in Gaza, making it the deadliest war for journalists. Guterres said journalists should be respected, protected, and able to work safely without fear. The killings of 6 journalists in Gaza have drawn international attention, prompting debate over press freedom, the dangers of reporting in conflict zones, and the broader information battle surrounding the war. Now, to unpack this, we are joined by Elon Salum, geopolitical analyst, joining us from Paris, France. Elon, thank you for making the time to join us for the program.
Thank you to you.
Elon, do you agree that deliberately killing 6 journalists when Israel is already so unpopular is a completely absurd decision?
Well, as a geopolitical analyst, I will be cautious on the use of the word absurd because I try to give keys of understanding, not to qualify it. But regarding your question, I think this is instead a brutal illustration of a strategic clash between military necessity on one side and international reputation on the other. And the complexity of the situation lies in 2 frontally opposing narratives. On one side, the Israeli army claimed that one of the journalists was a commander of the Hamas elite force, and that document proved his integration within Al Jazeera. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, some organizations like the UN Special Rapporteur Urka or the CPG reject this accusation, stating that Israel has provided no credible evidence. In short, I think that the action is clearly a public relations disaster for Israel, but it reflects a military logic that prioritizes neutralizing a perceived threat over its credibility.
Netanyahu has already admitted that Israel is losing the information war. Did this attack further worsen his position?
Yes, this attack unquestionably worsened Prime Minister Netanyahu's position, particularly after his admission, as you say, that Israel is losing the information war. It is a classical example of a tactical military action creating a significant strategic defeat in the information domain. When a leader like Netanyahu acknowledges a weakness, any subsequent action that confirms that weakness is immensely damaging. So the death of journalists, particularly when accusations against them are widely seen as unsubstantiated by press freedom group, handed Israel opponents a powerful and tragic symbol. So the strike provided tangible evidence for the very narrative Israel is fighting to debunk, but this was a self-inflicted wound in the battle for international opinion, and it will be exceptionally difficult for Israel to regain credibility on this issue.
Elon, how do you interpret the cautious reactions of the United States, UK and European Union, which did not categorically condemn the attack?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. I think that the cautious reactions by the US, the UK, or the European Union, this is a masterclass in geopolitical balancing. They express concern, but their unwillingness to issue a blanket condemnation speaks volumes about the limits of their alliances. So their position is a classic diplomatic paradox. They must condemn the act without condemning the actor. So this cautious approach is rooted in their strategic partnership with Israel, which they want to preserve for security reasons. So ultimately, their hesitant response can be interpreted as an attempt to maintain leverage on Israel. They are trying to walk a diplomatic tightrope, whether they can express moral concern without sacrificing their geopolitical interest. So as the old saying goes, in diplomacy, sometimes the loudest message is the one you don't send.
Elon Salum, thank you very much for talking to A News. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Southern Europe remains in the grip of fierce wildfires, with France, Spain, Portugal and the Balkans battling blazes fanned by scorching heat, strong winds and bone-dry conditions.
Firefighters are battling blazes across southern Europe on Tuesday in France, Spain, Portugal and Albania. The flames come due to the heat wave, as well as dry conditions and windy weather, which has all helped fuel the spread. In southern France, crews in Saint-Vallier continued to tackle hotspots from one of the nation's largest fires since 1949. The blaze, which began on the 5th of August, has burned 16,000 hectares, killed one person, injured 25, and destroyed dozens of homes. Authorities warned the risk of reignition remains high, linking its severity to climate change. In Spain, lightning ignited a wildfire north of Madrid late on Monday, forcing people to evacuate from their homes in Soto de Viñuelas and Fuente el Fresno. Winds of more than 70 kilometers per hour fanned the flames, gravely injuring one person and closing the M607 highway. In the south, more than 2,000 people, including tourists, had to flee from Tarifa as a separate blaze tore through eucalyptus and pine forests in the Sierra de la Plata mountains amid a heat wave pushing temperatures to 42 degrees Celsius. Portugal faced a major outbreak in Trancoso, where nearly 700 firefighters have been battling since Saturday to contain flames worsened by high temperatures and strong winds. Around 52,000 hectares have burned nationwide this year. That's above the seasonal average. In Albania, helicopters and ground crews fought flames after a weekend surge of wildfires across the Balkans, where extreme heat and drought have left conditions ripe for more outbreaks.
And the situation is equally alarming in northwestern Turkey, where a fast-moving wildfire is sweeping through the province of Çanakkale. The blaze has already destroyed several homes and forced hundreds of residents to evacuate. Authorities have shut down key transport routes in the area.
Hundreds of residents were forced to evacuate their homes on Monday as a wildfire swept through forested areas near the center of Turkey's northwestern Çanakkale province. The blaze, fanned by strong winds and high temperatures, destroyed dozens of houses and vehicles, according to local authorities. Interior Minister reported that 187 people were rescued by sea and 161 by land. People had to flee a university campus, military facilities, and residential neighborhoods. More than 700 personnel, supported by planes, helicopters, and firefighting vehicles, were deployed to battle the flames.
It's a terrible incident. We've never experienced anything like this before. As you can see, houses, vehicles, everything burned down. May God help us.
Helicopters were seen scooping water from the Dardanelles Strait to douse hotspots, while police water cannons tackled blazes that reached residential buildings.
When we first arrived, my car and our house were slightly damaged. May God help everyone. Overall, we've survived a terrible disaster. Apparently, it's still ongoing.
The city's airport, a section of the highway, and parts of the strait were temporarily closed. The Turkish Meteorological Service reported temperatures of 33 degrees Celsius and wind speeds of up to 66 kilometers per hour. Conditions that fueled the spread of the fire.
One of the well-known news platforms in the United States, the Newsmax television channel, has aired a special program dedicated to the Washington summit between the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia, mediated by President Donald Trump. The program discussed in detail the significance of the Washington meeting, its regional and global importance, as well as the role of the United States as a mediator. The guest of the program was Azerbaijan's ambassador to the United States, Khazar Ibrahim.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great. It was a historic moment. As my president said, it happened in the #1 capital in the world under the leadership of President Trump, who is a peacemaker. And it's quite notable that here, Azerbaijan and Armenia signed this joint declaration. And now the doors, windows, hearts, everything is open to have real peace in the region, to have it integrated not only with neighbors, but with the entire world. But we had a conflict for more than 30 years. We had lands under occupation, there were ethnic cleansings, there were a lot of refugees and IDPs who still cannot go back because of landmines. But what happened, all the negotiations in the last 30 years, negotiated, mediated by OSCE, didn't yield any positive results. And it's, I think, quite a diplomatic miracle that President Trump, within this very short period of time, managed to help us. Of course, we had direct negotiations with Armenia. That helped a lot because when you talk to each other, that's very important because it's at the end of the day, it's you gonna live with each other. It's your people going to interact with each other. It's your leadership who are going to talk to each other. So that helped. But at the same time, when you have a statesman, a leader, and a peacemaker like Donald Trump, it always helped. And when he stepped up, now we are in a position when we have the documents and all the roads are open for peace and prosperity of the region.
The full text of the agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia has been made public. It sets out the principles for ending decades of conflict, with the final signing still ahead.
The long-awaited agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Republic of Armenia has now been published. The work on the draft text was finalised on the 13th of March 2022. After being formally initialled on the 8th of August, as confirmed by the joint declaration signed on the same day, the agreement was made public on the 11th of August. The full treaty contains 17 detailed articles. However, it has not yet been signed and ratified. Armenia still needs to eliminate territorial claims towards Azerbaijan in order to remove the last remaining obstacle. The first 5 articles set the foundation with 5 key principles: mutual recognition of sovereignty and territorial integrity based on Soviet-era borders, renunciation of all current and future territorial claims, a pledge to refrain from the use or threat of force, respect for non-interference in internal affairs, and the establishment of diplomatic relations after ratification. Article 1 legally confirms that borders inherited from the former Soviet republics are now internationally recognized state boundaries, setting a firm baseline since 1991. Article 2 explicitly prohibits territorial claims now or in the future, and commits both sides not to support any acts threatening each other's territorial integrity or political unity. Articles 3 and 4 ban the use or threat of force and interference in internal affairs. These are critical given the Russian military presence in Armenia, which may complicate implementation. They also forbid any third party from using either country's territory to threaten the other. Article 5 provides for the establishment of formal diplomatic relations once the treaty is ratified, marking an important step towards normalization. Article 6 elaborates that delimitation and demarcation of borders will be done by joint commissions, but no specific maps have been agreed, meaning this will be a long and complex process. Article 7 bans any third-party military presence along the border, directly impacting the EU monitoring mission in Armenia. Armenia will need to negotiate with the EU about the future of this mission. Article 15 complements this by requiring withdrawal of existing interstate claims and banning new ones, including those initiated by third parties such as NGOs. These two articles emphasize keeping the peace process strictly bilateral and free from outside interference. Article 8 commits both sides to combat intolerance, hatred, and terrorism within their territories. Article 9 calls for cooperation to investigate and resolve cases of missing persons and enforced disappearances, a major demand from Azerbaijan following the First Karabakh War. Article 10 encourages cooperation in economic, transit, environmental, humanitarian, and cultural fields. Article 11 clarifies that existing international treaties with third countries remain valid so long as they do not conflict with this agreement. Article 12 prevents either party from using domestic laws to evade treaty obligations and, under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, obliges both to avoid actions that undermine the agreement before it formally enters into force. This creates a legal obligation by virtue of the treaty having already been initialed. Article 13 establishes a bilateral commission to oversee implementation, while Article 14 provides mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. Articles 16 and 17 cover ratification procedures and UN registration. In summary, while the treaty has been initialed, it has not yet been signed. Before signing, Armenia must remove its territorial claim, a step that is unlikely to occur before 2026.
Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says ending conflicts in the region is the country's diplomatic priority. Speaking in Aksaray, he highlighted Ankara's role as a stabilizing force for neighboring states and its self-reliance in security matters. Fidan pointed to Turkey's broad diplomatic reach from the Middle East to Africa, the Balkans and the Asia-Pacific, focusing on a strong defense industry and counter-terrorism. He said this experience benefits other nations, citing work in Somalia as an example. Turkey has hailed the Washington-brokered peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia as a historic opportunity for stability in the South Caucasus. Ankara says promoting peace and fostering regional cooperation remain at the heart of its foreign policy. To better understand the Turkish perspective on this milestone agreement and its strategic implications, we turn to our guest. Joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel is High Eitan Cohen Yanarojak from Tel Aviv University. Mr. Yanarojak, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Minister Hakan Fidan has said that ending regional conflicts is a top foreign policy priority. How does this peace deal align with Turkey's broader diplomatic strategy?
Well, of course, when we are seeing and analyzing the Turkish foreign policy, of course, from his perspective, ending the regional conflicts, of course, is coherent with the Turkish foreign policy's nature. Of course, in condition that it would satisfy Ankara's demands. When we are looking at Caucasia, we all witnessed the decisive victory of Azerbaijan over Armenia when Azerbaijan liberated the Karabakh region from the Armenian occupation. Of course, from this perspective, Fidan's view makes perfect sense. At the end, the war in Caucasus ended, when it satisfied the Turkish demands. Now we are seeing a very strong Azerbaijan, Armenia, even in the United States, as we are also seeing on the screen, that Prime Minister Pashinyan recognizes the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and the Armenian diaspora is not also raising voices against him. In a general manner.
Yes.
We are seeing that the Iranian influence is diminishing, the Russian influence is diminishing. So from this perspective, it's not surprising that Mr. Fidan is satisfied.
Mr. Yanarojak, the deal includes the US-backed Trump route corridor through the Zangezur region. How does Turkey assess its potential impact on regional trade and connectivity?
Well, this is a dream come true for Turkey. We all know that Turkey and the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic of Azerbaijan share a common territory, a border. And thanks to the Zangezur corridor now, we can see a continuous territorial integrity between proper Azerbaijan, Nakhchivan, and Turkey. And also via the Caspian Sea, we can see more coherent and more unity for the Turkic world, including Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and others. So, in my opinion, that's a great message. That's a great plus for the Turkish foreign policy, for the Azerbaijani foreign policy. It is, strengthening the Turkic republics vis-a-vis whom? Vis-a-vis Iran and vis-a-vis Russia. I think that's why the Iranians are not very much welcoming this outcome of the Zangezur corridor. And let me tell you, this Zangezur corridor will also minimize Iran's influence on Armenia, and it can push Armenia into a more Western axis, and we can see Armenia more integrated into Europe and the United States. I think this is also a good point for the Israeli foreign policy as well.
Hi, Eytan Cohen Yanarojak. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is firing back at the new United Nations report that paints a negative picture of returning refugees and for women working with aid agencies. A statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs calls the UN findings baseless and warns of possible legal action. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan says some Afghans returning from Iran and Pakistan have faced torture and security threats. The Taliban rejects that, arguing the report relies on testimonies from just 49 people and ignores what it describes as the positive experiences of millions of others. The same report also confirms for the first time that Afghan women working for the UN and other agencies have received death threats from unidentified individuals. The Taliban insists its members are not involved and says an Interior Ministry investigation is underway. Though spokesman Abdul Mateen Khaneh told the Associated Press that no such threats exists. The UN says threats have forced it to adopt emergency safety measures. This comes against the backdrop of sweeping restrictions on women, such as bans on most jobs, including with NGOs and the UN, mandatory chador dress codes, and outright denial of access to public spaces. A previous UN report found that at least 1.4 million girls have been deliberately deprived of education under Taliban rule. Aid agencies say these policies have crippled humanitarian work. Allegation Kabul denies. Tamim Bahis reporting for A News from Kabul, Afghanistan.
Kazakhstan's city of Aktau has hosted the first Urka International Short Film Festival last week. It brought together talent from across the Turkic world and showcased a total of 51 animated movies.
The International Organization of Turkic Culture hosted the Urka International Short Film Festival in Aktau, the 2025 Turkic World Capital of Culture. The festival gathered filmmakers, young animators and cinema students from across the Turkic world, with participants from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkey, Turkmenistan and Tatarstan. The programme featured screenings, panel discussions and cultural performances, highlighting how cinema and animation can preserve and promote the shared heritage of Turkic nations. Exhibitions and displays showcase traditional art, photography and literature alongside the film events. The name Urka refers to a guiding star cluster in Turkic mythology, long regarded as a cultural symbol among Turkic peoples. The three-day celebration concluded with an award ceremony honouring outstanding works from across the region.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.